20 black pastors who used God for fame. Private jets, multi-million-dollar mansions, designer suits are worth more than most people's cars. This is the life of some of America's most famous pastors. But here's the question nobody wants to ask. When does spreading the gospel become a business? Today, we're talking about 20 black pastors who've been accused of using God's name for fame, fortune, and personal gain. 1. Creflo Dollar. Let's start with perhaps the most infamous example, Creflo Dollar. And yes, that's his real name. Born Michael Smith in Georgia, Creflo Dollar founded World Changers Church International in 1986, which now has over 30,000 members. But Dollar became a household name for all the wrong reasons when he asked his followers to donate $300 each to help him buy a $65 million private jet. Think about that for a second. $65 million for a plane. Dollar claimed he needed this luxury aircraft to spread the gospel globally, saying that commercial flights were too inconvenient for his ministry. The backlash was immediate and fierce. People couldn't understand how a man who preaches about Jesus, who had no place to lay his head, could justify asking struggling families to fund a luxury jet. Dollar is a prominent figure in the prosperity gospel movement, which teaches that God wants believers to be wealthy and that faith can lead to financial blessings. Critics argue this theology preys on vulnerable people, promising them riches if they just give more money to the church. Dollar owns multiple mansions, luxury cars, and lives a lifestyle that seems worlds away from the humble existence Jesus described in the Bible. While he's defended his wealth as God's blessing, many former members have spoken out about feeling manipulated into giving money they couldn't afford, believing it would bring them prosperity that never came. 2. Bishop Eddie Long. Bishop Eddie Long was once called one of the most influential voices in America. He built New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Georgia into a mega-church empire with 25,000 members. Long was known for his expensive suits, luxury cars, and a $1.4 million mansion. He preached the prosperity gospel and lived it openly, often appearing in expensive jewelry and designer clothes that cost thousands of dollars. But Long's empire came crashing down when multiple young men accused him of sexual coercion and misconduct. 4 young men from his church filed lawsuits alleging that Long had used his position of power to manipulate them into sexual relationships when they were teenagers. The cases were settled out of court, but the damage to Long's reputation was permanent. What made this particularly devastating was that Long had been vocally anti-LGBTQ, leading marches against same-sex marriage while allegedly engaging in the very behavior he condemned. Long's story represents a tragic fall from grace that exposed how power and fame in ministry can corrupt. He had used his platform to build a massive following, but that same platform amplified his downfall. Former members reported feeling betrayed, not just by the allegations, but by the lavish lifestyle Long lived while many in his congregation struggled financially. He died in 2017 from cancer, but his legacy remains a cautionary tale about unchecked power in the pulpit. 3. Frederick K.C. Price. Frederick K.C. Price founded Crenshaw Christian Center in Los Angeles in 1973, growing it into one of the largest churches in America with over 28,000 members. Price was a pioneer of the prosperity gospel movement and never apologized for his wealth. He famously said, "If the mafia can drive a Mercedes-Benz, why can't the king's kids?" Price owned multiple luxury homes, expensive cars, and lived a lifestyle of extreme affluence. Price's ministry focused heavily on financial prosperity, teaching that poverty was a curse and that true believers should expect material wealth. He wrote numerous books on prosperity and faith, building a media empire that generated millions in revenue. Critics pointed out that while Price preached about breaking financial curses, many in his predominantly black congregation remained in poverty, despite faithfully tithing their limited resources. The controversy around Price intensified when investigations revealed the lavish spending of church funds. His church owned a Rolls-Royce and multiple luxury vehicles, supposedly for ministry purposes. Price defended his lifestyle, arguing that he was simply enjoying the blessings God promised to the faithful. However, former members told stories of being pressured to give beyond their means, with some ending up in financial ruin. Price passed away in 2021, leaving behind a complicated legacy. While some credit him with empowering Black Christians to expect better, others see him as someone who exploited faith for personal gain while his congregation struggled economically. 4. Bishop Noel Jones. Bishop Noel Jones, brother of legendary singer Grace Jones, leads the City of Refuge Church in Gardena, California, with approximately 17,000 members. Jones gained additional fame through reality television, appearing on shows like Preachers of L.A., which showcased the lavish lifestyles of prominent Black pastors. The show featured Jones driving luxury cars, wearing expensive clothes, and living in upscale accommodations, all while preaching to a congregation that included many working-class families. Jones represents a new breed of celebrity pastor who embraces fame as enthusiastically as ministry. He's been romantically linked to various celebrities and has never shied away from the spotlight. While he's an undeniably charismatic preacher with genuine oratory gifts, critics question whether his focus has shifted from saving souls to maintaining celebrity status. His appearances on reality TV, which often featured petty drama and materialistic displays, seemed contradictory to biblical teachings about humility and modesty. What makes Jones's story particularly interesting is how he's navigated the intersection of faith and entertainment. He's defended his lifestyle, saying that pastors shouldn't have to live in poverty and that success isn't ungodly. However, transparency about church finances has been an issue, with critics noting that mega-church pastors like Jones rarely disclose exactly how much they earn or how church money is spent. Jones continues to preach prosperity and success, but questions remain about whether his ministry serves God or his own celebrity status. 5. Jamal Bryant. Jamal Bryant is a charismatic young pastor who took over Eddie Long's former church, New Birth Missionary Baptist Church, in 2018. Before that, he founded Empowerment Temple in Baltimore, growing it to over 10,000 members. Bryant is known for his fashionable appearance, social media savvy, and connections to celebrities. He's been called the hip-hop pastor for his ability to attract younger audiences and his modern approach to ministry. However, Bryant's personal life has been marred by scandal. He admitted to multiple affairs while married, fathering children outside his marriage, and has been accused of using his position to pursue relationships with women in his congregation. These revelations were particularly damaging because Bryant often preached about family values and morality. His ex-wife, Giselle Bryant of Real Housewives of Potomac fame, has publicly discussed his infidelity, bringing his personal failures into the mainstream spotlight. Bryant represents how social media and celebrity culture have transformed modern ministry. He has hundreds of thousands of followers across platforms and uses his online presence to promote his sermons, books, and appearances. While he's done legitimate community work and activism, critics argue that his focus on fame and maintaining a celebrity image has overshadowed spiritual leadership. Bryant has acknowledged his past mistakes and claims to have changed, but questions persist about whether his ministry serves God's purpose or his own ambitions for influence and recognition in both religious and secular spaces. 6. Bishop Paul Morton. Bishop Paul Morton founded the Full Gospel Baptist Church Fellowship International and served as senior pastor of Greater St. Stephen Church in New Orleans. Morton is also a Grammy-nominated gospel singer, adding another dimension to his fame and influence. He built a massive following through his powerful preaching and musical talent, creating an empire that spanned multiple states with affiliated churches. Morton's controversies came from multiple directions. He faced lawsuits from former church employees alleging financial mismanagement and unfair labor practices. There were questions about how church funds were being used, particularly regarding his music career and personal expenses. Additionally, Morton faced criticism for his autocratic leadership style, with former members describing a culture where Questioning leadership was treated as questioning God himself. The prosperity message Morton preached stood in stark contrast to the economic struggles of many in his congregation, particularly after Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans. While members lost everything, Morton maintained his affluent lifestyle, raising questions about pastoral responsibility during a crisis. Morton eventually moved to Atlanta, where he took over another church, but the controversies followed him. 7. Pastor Keith Butler. Pastor Keith Butler founded Word of Faith International Christian Center in Michigan, growing it into a megachurch with multiple locations. Butler is a prosperity gospel preacher who has been vocal about his belief that Christians should be wealthy. He's also ventured into politics, running unsuccessfully for the U.S. Senate in 2006, which critics saw as using his religious platform for political ambition. Butler's ministry has been built on the promise that faith leads to financial blessing, and he's lived that message personally with luxury homes, expensive cars, and a lavish lifestyle. However, investigations into his church's finances revealed troubling patterns. Large sums of money were spent on luxury items and personal expenses, with little transparency about where the tithe and offering money actually went. Former members reported being taught that not tithing would result in curses, creating a culture of fear-based giving. What makes Butler's story particularly concerning is how he mixed politics with ministry. He used his pulpit to promote political candidates and causes, blurring the lines between church and state. This raised legal questions about tax-exempt status while also troubling members who felt their church was becoming a political organization. Butler has defended his approach, arguing that Christians should be involved in politics and that prosperity is biblical. 8. Bishop Carlton Pearson. Bishop Carlton Pearson's story is unique on this list. He was once a rising star in Pentecostal Christianity, building Higher Dimensions Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, into a congregation of over 5,000 members. He was mentored by Oral Roberts and seemed destined for mega-church greatness. However, Pearson's pursuit of fame and relevance led him down a controversial path that ultimately destroyed his ministry. Pearson became famous not for the prosperity gospel, but for declaring that he no longer believed in hell, promoting what he called the gospel of inclusion. While this theological shift was presented as revelation, critics saw it as a calculated attempt to gain mainstream acceptance and differentiate himself in a crowded market of preachers. Almost overnight, his congregation dwindled from thousands to fewer than 100. He was declared a heretic by his former Pentecostal colleagues. What makes Pearson's story relevant here is the question of motivation. Did he genuinely have a theological awakening, or was this a bid for fame and attention in a different market? Pearson began appearing on mainstream television, wrote books, and even had his story featured in a Netflix film. He seemed to embrace his new role as a controversial religious figure, appearing more interested in media attention than in traditional ministry. 9. Pastor Marvin Winans. Pastor Marvin Winans comes from the famous Winans family, gospel music royalty. He founded Perfecting Church in Detroit, leveraging his family's fame to build a substantial congregation. Winans is both a Grammy-winning gospel artist and a pastor, representing the blurred lines between entertainment and ministry that characterize many modern religious leaders. Winans faced controversy when his church was sued by former members over financial practices. There were allegations of misuse of church funds, with money supposedly designated for ministry being used for personal expenses. Additionally, Winans was criticized for his lavish lifestyle, including expensive cars and designer clothes, which seemed inconsistent with the economic struggles of his Detroit congregation. The most significant controversy involved Winans' handling of church discipline and his autocratic leadership style. Former members described a culture where questioning leadership was treated as rebellion against God. Winans also faced criticism for performing at secular events for large fees, while his church struggled with debt. The question arose, was he a pastor who happened to be a musician, or a musician who used ministry as an additional revenue stream? His story illustrates how family fame and talent can be leveraged to build a ministry, but also how the entertainment industry's values can infiltrate church culture. 10. Bishop Nathaniel Bronner Jr. Bishop Nathaniel Bronner Jr. is the pastor of Word of Faith Family Worship Cathedral in Atlanta, but he's perhaps better known as the heir to the Bronner Brothers hair care empire. This dual identity as businessman and pastor has always raised questions about his primary motivations. Bronner has leveraged both his family's business success and his religious platform to build wealth and influence. Bronner's prosperity gospel message aligns conveniently with his business interests as he preaches that God wants believers to be entrepreneurs and wealthy. Critics point out that his sermons often sound more like motivational business seminars than spiritual messages. He's used his pulpit to promote his business ventures, blurring the lines between church and commerce in troubling ways. Controversies have surrounded Bronner's business practices, with former employees of both his church and his family business alleging unfair treatment and financial impropriety. There have been questions about how church resources are used to support business interests and vice versa. Additionally, Bronner's opulent lifestyle, funded by both business and ministry, has been criticized as excessive and unbecoming of a spiritual leader. 11. Pastor Wiley Jackson. Pastor Wiley Jackson founded Christ Tabernacle Baptist Church in New York and became a significant figure in gospel music promotion, creating Gospel Superfest, a televised gospel music competition. Jackson represented the entertainment side of ministry, building his influence through media production rather than traditional pastoral work. However, his story took a dark turn when financial irregularities came to light. Jackson faced lawsuits from artists and vendors who claimed they were never paid for their work on gospel music projects. There were allegations that he used his position in ministry and gospel music to exploit artists, promising exposure and payment that never materialized. Additionally, questions arose about how church funds were being managed and whether money intended for ministry was being diverted to entertainment ventures. The most troubling aspect of Jackson's story is how he used the gospel music industry as a vehicle for personal gain while presenting himself as a servant of God. Gospel artists, often struggling financially themselves, trusted him because of his pastoral credentials, only to be allegedly exploited. Former associates described Jackson as more interested in making money and gaining fame than in genuinely promoting gospel music or advancing ministry. 12. Pastor Darrell Scott. Pastor Darrell Scott leads New Spirit Revival Center in Ohio and gained national prominence as one of Donald Trump's most visible black religious supporters. Scott became a regular at the White House during the Trump administration, leading to accusations that he was using his ministry primarily as a platform for political access and influence rather than spiritual leadership. Scott's close association with Trump was controversial within the black church community, particularly given Trump's policies and rhetoric that many felt were harmful to black Americans. Critics accused Scott of selling out his community for political access and fame. He appeared regularly on television news programs, often defending Trump's most controversial statements and policies, which seemed inconsistent with the prophetic ministry that speaks truth to power. Questions also arose about Scott's financial dealings and how his political connections might be benefiting him personally and financially. While Scott defended his political involvement as legitimate ministry, critics saw opportunism and a desire for the spotlight. His church remained relatively small, suggesting that his focus was more on national political fame than on building local ministry. 13. Bishop John Hannah. Bishop John Hannah founded New Bethel Cathedral in Detroit, building it into a substantial congregation. Hannah was known for his flamboyant preaching style and his emphasis on prosperity gospel teachings. However, his ministry was plagued by financial controversies and questions about his personal life that undermined his spiritual authority. Hannah faced multiple lawsuits related to church finances, with creditors alleging that the church had accumulated significant debt while Hannah maintained an extravagant personal lifestyle. There were questions about where the tithe and offering money were actually going, with little transparency about church finances. Former members reported feeling pressured to give money they couldn't afford, with promises of a financial breakthrough that never materialized. Additionally, Hannah faced allegations about inappropriate relationships and misconduct, though many details remained murky due to settlements and non-disclosure agreements. What was clear was a pattern of prioritizing image and lifestyle over genuine pastoral care. Hannah was often seen in expensive designer clothes and luxury vehicles, while church bills went unpaid and staff members reportedly struggled financially. 14. Pastor Mark Burns. Pastor Mark Burns leads a small church in South Carolina, but gained national fame as a televangelist and political figure, becoming one of Donald Trump's most vocal supporters. Burns represents how some pastors use minimal local ministry as a launching pad for media fame and political influence. His congregation is small, but his social media following and television appearances made him a household name among certain audiences. Burns faced multiple controversies, including being caught in lies about his educational credentials and his military service. He claimed to have a bachelor's degree that he didn't possess and exaggerated his military background. These revelations raised serious questions about his character and integrity as a spiritual leader. Rather than focusing on building a local ministry, Burns seemed primarily interested in media appearances and political activism. Critics pointed out that Burns appeared to be using his pastoral title primarily as credentials for political commentary, rather than engaging in genuine ministry. His church remained tiny while he traveled constantly for political events and television appearances. Questions arose about how his ministry was funded and whether his political activities were generating personal income that wasn't being properly disclosed. 15. Donnie McClurkin. Donnie McClurkin is a Grammy-winning gospel artist and pastor of Perfecting Faith Church in New York. McClurkin's story is complicated because he is genuinely talented and has created music that has blessed millions. However, questions have arisen about whether his primary calling is music or ministry, and whether he's used pastoral credentials to enhance his entertainment career. McClurkin has been controversial for his public statements about sexuality, particularly his claims about overcoming homosexuality through faith. These statements have been criticized as harmful and unbiblical by many theologians and mental health professionals. Critics argue that McClurkin has used his platform to promote views that damage LGBTQ individuals while potentially dealing with his own struggles in this area. Financial questions have also surrounded McClurkin's ministry. His church operates in relative obscurity, while his music career generates significant income. There are questions about transparency regarding how money flows between his music business and his church, and whether ministry work primarily serves to maintain his gospel music credibility and market access. 16. Bishop Clarence McClendon. Bishop Clarence McClendon founded Full Harvest International Church in Los Angeles and became known for his energetic preaching style and prosperity gospel message. McClendon built his ministry on promises of breakthrough and financial blessing, attracting thousands with his charismatic personality and motivational messages. However, his personal life and financial practices raised serious questions about his authenticity. McClendon faced scandal when his marriage publicly fell apart amid allegations of infidelity. His ex-wife made public statements about his behavior and character that contradicted the image he presented from the pulpit. This was particularly damaging because McClendon had positioned himself as a marriage counselor and family advocate, writing books and conducting seminars on relationships while allegedly failing in his own marriage. Financial controversies also plagued McClendon's ministry. There were questions about lavish spending and a lack of transparency about church finances. McClendon lived in luxury with expensive homes and cars while soliciting donations from working-class members. Former members reported feeling manipulated into giving through high-pressure tactics and promises that proved empty. 17. Bishop Kevin Wesley. Bishop Kevin Wesley leads Beulah Land Bible Church in Florida and has been one of the more controversial figures in Black religious circles. Wesley gained notoriety for his extreme prosperity gospel teachings and his lavish lifestyle, which includes multiple luxury properties and expensive vehicles. However, what makes Wesley particularly controversial is the allegations of abuse and manipulation within his ministry. Former members have come forward with disturbing accounts of Wesley's leadership style, describing a cult-like environment where questioning the pastor was treated as rebellion against God himself. There were allegations of financial exploitation, with members being pressured to give beyond their means through teachings that equated faithfulness with financial giving. Some former members reported going into debt or depleting their savings based on promises of financial miracles that never materialized. Wesley has also faced accusations of using his position to pursue inappropriate relationships with women in his congregation, allegedly taking advantage of his spiritual authority. While he has denied wrongdoing, the number of similar accounts from different sources raised serious credibility questions. Additionally, his church has been described as insular and controlling, with Wesley maintaining tight control over members' lives beyond normal pastoral care. Wesley's story represents the darker side of unchecked pastoral authority. Critics argue that he built a ministry primarily to serve his own desires for wealth, control, and adulation, rather than to genuinely serve God or his congregation. His teaching that questioning leadership equals questioning God creates an environment where abuse can flourish unchecked. His case raises important questions about accountability structures in independent churches and how easily religious authority can be weaponized by those seeking power and personal gain. 18. Dr. Jasper Williams, Jr. Dr. Jasper Williams, Jr. serves as pastor of Salem Bible Church in Atlanta and has been a prominent figure in Black Baptist circles for decades. Williams gained national attention when he delivered a controversial eulogy at Aretha Franklin's funeral that many felt was inappropriate and self-serving. This moment crystallized concerns that had existed about Williams for years regarding his priorities and motivations. Williams's funeral sermon for Franklin focused more on his own views about black culture and politics than on honoring the Queen of Soul, leading to widespread criticism that he had used this high-profile platform for personal grandstanding. Franklin's family members publicly expressed disappointment with the eulogy, suggesting that Williams had prioritized making headlines over showing respect and pastoral sensitivity. Throughout his career, Williams has been known for seeking spotlight opportunities and high-profile speaking engagements. Critics have questioned whether his ministry has been more about building personal fame than about serving his local congregation. His church, while substantial, has not been his primary focus, as he has pursued national recognition through controversial statements and appearances at celebrity events. Williams represents how some pastors use their credentials to gain access to platforms where they can promote themselves rather than focusing on genuine pastoral ministry. The Aretha Franklin eulogy controversy was particularly egregious because it demonstrated an apparent willingness to exploit even a funeral for personal promotion. Critics argue that Williams has spent his career using God's name primarily to gain fame and recognition, treating ministry as a path to celebrity rather than as a calling to serve others sacrificially. 19. Pastor Patrick Wooden. Pastor Patrick Wooden leads Upper Room Church of God in Christ in North Carolina and has gained national attention primarily through controversial political activism rather than traditional ministry. Wooden became particularly well known for extreme anti-LGBTQ rhetoric that included graphic and scientifically unfounded claims about homosexuality. Critics argue that Wooden has used his pastoral title primarily to gain credibility for political activism rather than engaging in genuine spiritual ministry. Wooden has made numerous media appearances and has been associated with various political organizations, leading to questions about whether activism or ministry is his primary focus. His church remains relatively small while he travels extensively for political events and media opportunities. There are questions about transparency regarding funding and whether his political activities generate personal income beyond his pastoral role. What makes Wooden particularly controversial is the extreme nature of his rhetoric, which many theologians and mental health professionals have condemned as harmful and potentially dangerous. Critics argue that he's used inflammatory language primarily to gain attention and media coverage rather than out of genuine theological conviction. His statements have been featured on hate group watchdog lists, raising questions about the line between religious conviction and harmful extremism. 20. Pastor Michael Todd. Pastor Michael Todd leads Transformation Church in Oklahoma and represents a new generation of celebrity pastors who have fully embraced social media and modern marketing techniques. Todd has millions of followers across social media platforms and has built a massively successful ministry that includes books, conferences, and merchandise. While he's younger than others on this list and his full story is still being written, concerning patterns have emerged. Todd gained viral attention for controversial sermon illustrations, including one where he literally spat into his hand and rubbed it on someone's face to make a point about accepting what God gives us. While defended as attention-grabbing teaching, critics saw it as shocking people for viral moments rather than genuine spiritual insight. This incident raised questions about whether Todd's ministry prioritizes social media engagement over biblical substance. Financial questions have also emerged about Todd's rapid wealth accumulation and the commercial nature of his ministry. His church operates more like a media production company than a traditional congregation, with heavy emphasis on creating content for social media and generating revenue through book sales, conferences, and merchandise. Todd's lifestyle has become increasingly lavish as his fame has grown, raising familiar questions about prosperity, gospel values. What do you think? Have you had experiences with any of these pastors or similar situations? Let me know in the comments below. And if this video made you think, hit that like button and subscribe for more content that asks the questions others won't. 1. Michael Winans Jr. The music world felt heartbroken when news broke about Michael Winans Jr. in 2013. This man came from the famous Winans family, a name that meant everything good in gospel music. People trusted this family like they trusted their own relatives. But Michael Jr. had other plans that would hurt many people who believed in him. He started telling people about amazing business deals that could make them rich. Michael Jr. knew exactly who to talk to, church members who had saved their money and wanted to help God's work grow. He would sit with these good people and tell them stories about investments that would give them lots of money back. These folks thought they were helping spread God's message while also taking care of their families. But Michael Jr. was running what experts call a Ponzi scheme. This means he took money from new people to pay the older investors, making everyone think the business was working great. For years, this trick worked because people kept joining. The scheme grew bigger and bigger, reaching about $8 million. All this money came from people who went to church every Sunday and believed in doing right. When everything fell apart, the pain was terrible. Families lost their life savings. Old people who had worked hard for decades found out their money was gone. Some had planned to use that money for medical bills or to help their children go to college. Instead, they got nothing but broken promises and empty bank accounts. The court case was very sad to watch. Michael Jr. had to face the judge and admit what he did was wrong. He got sent to prison for many years, and the judge ordered him to pay back the money. But most of the victims never got their money back because it was already spent or hidden somewhere they couldn't find it. 2. Shepherd Bushiri. Far away in Africa, another story of broken trust was happening. Shepherd Bushiri called himself a prophet and built a huge following of people who believed he could perform miracles. His church services were packed with thousands of people who came hoping for healing and blessings. They saw him on television and thought he was chosen by God to help them. But reports started coming out that made people very worried. Investigators found that Bushiri was using his church like a business to make himself rich. People who came to his services were told to give money for special prayers or miracles. Some sold their homes or borrowed money just to get these so-called blessings. The worst part was how Bushiri lived compared to his followers. While church members struggled to pay for food and medicine, he bought expensive cars and lived in fancy houses. He wore costly clothes and jewelry while telling people that giving him money would make God happy with them. When authorities started looking closely at his church money, Bushiri and his wife ran away to their home country. They left behind thousands of people who had trusted them with their hearts and their savings. Many of these followers felt completely lost because they had believed so strongly that Bushiri was speaking for God. The people who got hurt the most were often poor families who gave their last bit of money thinking it would help them get ahead in life. Instead, they ended up with even less than before, while Bushiri lived like a king in another country where the law couldn't easily reach him. 3. Toby Adegboyega and SPAC Nation. In London, a young and energetic preacher named Toby Adegboyega was building something that looked amazing from the outside. His church, called SPAC Nation, attracted hundreds of young people with exciting music and powerful speeches. The church seemed modern and cool, very different from old-fashioned churches that many young folks found boring. But behind all the excitement, something very wrong was happening. Reports started showing that Adegboyega was asking church members for huge amounts of money. Young people who barely had enough to pay rent were being told to give thousands of pounds to the church. Some were encouraged to take out loans or ask their families for money. The saddest part was seeing how these young church members lived compared to their pastor. While they shared small apartments and ate cheap food, Adegboyega drove expensive cars and wore designer clothes. He would post pictures of his luxury lifestyle on social media while his followers struggled to make ends meet. Many of these young people had joined the church hoping to find direction in their lives. They thought they were part of something special that would help them grow spiritually and maybe even financially. Instead, they found themselves deeper in debt and feeling confused about what real faith should look like. When investigators started asking questions about where all the church money was going, the answers were very troubling. It seemed like most of the money that members sacrificed to give was being used to fund Adegboyega's comfortable lifestyle rather than helping people or supporting real ministry work. 4. Kirby John Caldwell. In Houston, Texas, a well-respected pastor named Kirby John Caldwell had built a reputation that reached far beyond his church walls. He had advised presidents and was known throughout the country as a wise religious leader. People looked up to him and trusted him completely. His church members felt proud to have such an important pastor leading them. But Caldwell got involved in a bond investment scheme that turned out to be completely fake. He used his good reputation to convince people to invest in bonds that were supposed to help poor countries. These bonds seemed like a perfect way for good Christian people to make money while helping those in need around the world. The problem was that these bonds were worthless pieces of paper. The whole thing was set up to trick people into giving their money for something that didn't really exist. Caldwell helped convince many people to invest, and they trusted him because of his position and his good name in the community. When the truth came out, the pain was felt by many families who had believed in their pastor. They had given him their retirement money, their children's college funds, and their life savings. These weren't rich people trying to get richer. They were regular church folks who thought they were making a smart and godly investment. Caldwell had to go to court and admit he was guilty of conspiracy and wire fraud. The judge sent him to federal prison, and he was ordered to help pay back the money that people lost. But for many victims, the money was gone forever, and they also lost their trust in religious leaders. 5. Lamore Bling Bishop Whitehead. In Brooklyn, New York, a flashy pastor named Lamore Whitehead loved to show off his wealth during church services. People called him the Bling Bishop because he wore expensive jewelry and designer suits while preaching. His church members saw all this fancy stuff and thought it meant God was blessing their pastor in special ways. But Whitehead was actually stealing money from the very people who looked up to him. He convinced church members and other people to give him their money by promising he would invest it wisely and give them big profits. Instead, he used their money to buy more jewelry and luxury items for himself. The most heartbreaking part was how he treated an old woman who trusted him completely. She gave him her life savings because she believed he would help her make more money for her family. Instead, Whitehead spent her money on himself and left her with nothing. This elderly woman had worked hard her whole life and saved every penny, only to have it stolen by someone she thought was a man of God. Whitehead also tried to threaten and trick other people when they started asking questions about their missing money. He thought he could scare them into staying quiet about what he had done. But the law caught up with him, and he was found guilty of fraud, attempted extortion, and lying to investigators. When the judge sentenced him to federal prison, many people felt sad, but also relieved that justice was served. The victims knew they probably wouldn't get their money back, but at least they saw that even pastors who think they're above the law have to face consequences for their crimes. 6. Terry Wayne Millender. In Alexandria, Virginia, Pastor Terry Wayne Millender ran a church called Victorious Life Church, where people came seeking hope and spiritual guidance. But behind his pastoral duties, Millender was operating several fake business schemes that would eventually destroy the financial lives of many trusting individuals. He created companies with impressive names like MEMG and Kingdom Commodities Unlimited. These businesses promised investors incredible returns on their money through various deals, including what he claimed was a profitable oil partnership in Nigeria and microfinance opportunities that seemed too good to pass up. Church members and other community people heard about these amazing investment opportunities from their pastor, someone they trusted with their souls. They thought if Pastor Millender was involved, it must be legitimate and blessed by God. Families emptied their savings accounts and borrowed money from relatives to invest in what they believed would secure their financial future. The Nigerian oil deal that Millender talked about so enthusiastically never existed. The microfinance opportunities were just stories he made up to collect more money from hopeful investors. Instead of using the money for legitimate business purposes, Millender spent it on his personal expenses and lifestyle. When investigators finally uncovered the truth, they found that hundreds of thousands of dollars had been stolen from people who could least afford to lose it. Working families who had scraped together their savings, elderly people on fixed incomes, and young couples saving for their first home all found themselves financially ruined. The court sentenced Millender to 8 years in federal prison and ordered him to pay back the money he stole. But most of the victims never recovered their losses, and many had to completely rebuild their financial lives from scratch. The emotional damage of being betrayed by their spiritual leader added another layer of pain to their financial suffering. 7. Ruldy Alexandre. During the difficult time of the pandemic, when many businesses and organizations were struggling to survive, the government created the Paycheck Protection Program to help keep people employed. Pastor Ruldy Alexandre saw this as an opportunity, but not to help his community. He saw it as a way to steal money. Alexandre submitted fake applications for pandemic relief loans, claiming his church and other organizations needed money to keep paying their workers during the crisis. He created false documents and lied about how many people worked for these organizations and how much money they needed to survive. The saddest part about Alexandre's crimes was the timing. While real businesses were closing down and people were losing their jobs and struggling to feed their families, he was stealing money that was meant to help communities survive one of the hardest times in recent history. The money he stole, over $662,000, could have helped real businesses keep their doors open or could have been used for other emergency programs to help people in need. Instead, Alexandre used it for his personal benefit while people in his own community were suffering. When federal investigators caught him, Alexandre had to face the reality of what he had done. The judge sentenced him to 2 years in prison and ordered him to pay back every penny he had stolen. He also had to serve additional time under supervision after his prison sentence ended. The people in his church and community felt deeply hurt by what their pastor had done. They had trusted him to lead them spiritually during a very scary time, but instead he had been focused on enriching himself while they worried about paying rent and buying groceries. 8. Ali Floridin. In Miami, Florida, Pastor Ely Floridin led the New Bethel Baptist Church, where congregation members came each week seeking spiritual guidance and community support. But like many other religious leaders during the pandemic, Floridin decided to take advantage of government programs designed to help struggling businesses and organizations. Floridin created fake companies that existed only on paper and then applied for Paycheck Protection Program loans for these non-existent businesses. He submitted applications claiming these companies had employees who needed to be paid and expenses that needed to be covered to survive the economic difficulties of the pandemic. The applications were filled with lies about workers who didn't exist, payrolls that were never paid, and business expenses that were completely made up. Floridin was essentially stealing money from a program that was created to help real people keep their jobs during one of the most challenging economic periods in decades. While families in his community were losing their jobs and struggling to pay for basic necessities like food and housing, Floridin was fraudulently collecting money that could have gone to legitimate businesses that actually needed help. His actions took resources away from people who were genuinely suffering and needed assistance. The federal court system took Floridin's crimes very seriously, especially because he had violated the public trust during a time of national emergency. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in federal prison, sending a clear message that taking advantage of disaster relief programs would be punished severely. 9. Ephron Taylor. Ephron Taylor presented himself as a young financial genius who could help church communities build wealth and achieve their dreams of financial security. He traveled from church to church, hosting seminars called Building Wealth, where he promised to teach regular people how to make smart investments and become financially successful. Taylor specifically targeted religious communities because he knew church members were more likely to trust someone who shared their faith and values. He would speak at churches and religious conferences using spiritual language and biblical references to make his investment schemes sound godly and blessed. His promises were incredibly appealing to people who had worked hard their entire lives but still struggled financially. He offered real estate investments and other business opportunities that he claimed would provide steady income and long-term financial security for families who had never had such opportunities before. But everything Taylor promoted was actually a massive Ponzi scheme designed to steal money from trusting church members. The real estate investments didn't exist, the business opportunities were fake, and the promised returns were impossible to achieve through legitimate means. Over several years, Taylor managed to defraud more than $16 million from people who attended his seminars and believed in his promises. These victims included teachers, factory workers, retirees, and other regular folks who had saved their money carefully and hoped to improve their family's financial situation. When the scheme finally collapsed, hundreds of families discovered they had lost their life savings, their retirement funds, and their children's college money. Many had borrowed against their homes or taken loans to invest with Taylor, leaving them in debt with no way to recover their losses. The federal court sentenced Taylor to nearly 20 years in prison, one of the longest sentences given for this type of financial crime. But no amount of prison time could undo the damage done to the families who trusted him with their financial future and their faith in religious financial advisors. 10. Staccato Powell. Former Bishop Staccato Powell of the AME Zion Church was involved in a complex scheme that targeted church properties worth millions of dollars in California. As a respected religious leader, Powell held a position that gave him access to valuable church real estate in expensive areas like Palo Alto, Oakland, San Jose, and Los Angeles. The allegations against Powell involve illegally transferring ownership of these church properties through fraudulent deed changes. These properties belonged to congregations that had worshiped in them for decades, building their spiritual communities and investing their hearts and resources into maintaining these sacred spaces. The scheme allegedly involved about $14 million worth of church property that was supposed to belong to the congregations and their communities. Instead, Powell and others reportedly found ways to change the legal ownership documents to steal these valuable properties from the people who rightfully owned them. Church properties are particularly important to religious communities because they represent generations of sacrifice and dedication. Congregation members often donate money, volunteer their time, and invest their hearts into building and maintaining their places of worship. When someone steals church property, they're not just taking real estate, they're destroying the spiritual home of an entire community. The case against Powell is still working its way through the legal system, with federal prosecutors building their case against him and his alleged co-conspirators. The complexity of real estate fraud cases means it often takes years to fully investigate and prosecute these crimes. The congregations affected by this alleged scheme have had to deal with uncertainty about their ability to continue using their church buildings while the legal case proceeds. Some may have had to find new places to worship or worry about losing the spiritual homes where they've gathered for generations. Community members who trusted Powell as their spiritual leader now face the painful reality that someone they respected may have been planning to steal their most precious community asset, the building where they come together to worship and support each other through life's challenges. 11. Creflo Dollar. Behind the polished smile and expensive suits stood a man whose name seemed almost too perfect for what he would become known for. Creflo Dollar built his ministry on promises that God wanted everyone to be rich, but many would later question whether these teachings served his followers or just his own bank account. His World Changers Church International became a massive operation, yet critics watched as Dollar lived in luxury while asking his congregation for more and more money. The pastor often told his followers that poverty was a curse and that true believers should expect financial blessings. He taught that giving money to his ministry was like planting seeds that God would multiply back to the giver. But as years passed, people noticed that most of the multiplication seemed to happen in Dollar's own life. His million-dollar homes, private jets, and expensive cars became symbols of everything wrong with prosperity preaching. Things got worse when Dollar asked his followers to help him buy a $65 million private jet. He claimed he needed it to spread God's word around the world, but many saw it as just another example of a pastor getting rich off people's faith. The request caused such an uproar that he eventually backed down, but the damage to his reputation was already done. 12. Eddie Long. In the sprawling suburbs of Atlanta, Eddie Long turned his New Birth Missionary Baptist Church into an empire worth millions. But beneath the success lay troubling questions about how he used his position and his teachings about money. Long preached that God wanted his followers to prosper, yet it seemed like most of the prospering happened at the top of his organization. Long lived in a mansion worth over $1 million and drove luxury cars while many in his congregation struggled financially. He often spoke about the importance of giving generously to the church, suggesting that those who gave more would receive more blessings from God. This created a painful cycle where people with little money felt pressured to give what they couldn't afford, hoping for divine rewards that rarely came. The pastor's lavish lifestyle became even more controversial when serious allegations emerged about his personal conduct. Multiple lawsuits accused him of taking advantage of young men in his congregation. Though Long denied these claims, he eventually settled the cases out of court. The scandals revealed how power and money in religious settings could corrupt even those who claimed to speak for God. 13. Fred K.C. Price. For decades, Fred Price stood behind his pulpit in Los Angeles, preaching a message that mixed faith with financial promises. His Crenshaw Christian Center became one of the largest churches in America, built on teachings that suggested poverty and sickness were signs of weak faith. Price told his followers that God wanted them wealthy and healthy, but critics noticed that this prosperity seemed most visible in the pastor's own life. Price owned multiple expensive cars, lived in luxury, and built a massive church complex that cost millions to construct. He taught that Christians should expect material blessings and that giving money to the church was a sure way to receive more back from God. This message appealed to many people struggling with financial problems, but it also created unrealistic expectations that left many disappointed. The pastor often criticized other Christian denominations for being too focused on suffering and poverty. He argued that Jesus was actually wealthy and that his followers should be too. But as Price aged and his health declined, some began questioning whether his teachings about divine health and prosperity really worked the way he claimed they did. 14. T.D. Jakes. From his base in Dallas, T.D. Jakes continues to build a media and ministry empire that has made him one of the most recognizable faces in modern Christianity. While he often speaks more carefully than other prosperity preachers, his lifestyle and some of his teachings still draw criticism from those who feel he mixes God's Word with promises of earthly success. Jakes currently lives in a multi-million-dollar mansion and owns expensive cars while leading the Potter's House, a megachurch with thousands of members. He writes books, produces movies, and hosts conferences that generate millions in revenue. Though he claims these ventures help spread Christian messages, critics point out that they also make him incredibly wealthy, while many of his followers struggle financially. The pastor sometimes preaches that God wants people to succeed in life, including financially. He sells products and services related to personal development and spiritual growth, creating multiple income streams beyond traditional church donations. While supporters say he helps many people feel better about their lives, some question whether his version of Christianity focuses too much on personal success rather than spiritual growth and serving others. His Potter's House Church operates like a business empire, with merchandise sales, conference tickets, and book deals bringing in steady income. Jakes markets himself as both a spiritual leader and a life coach, blending religious teachings with motivational speaking that appeals to people wanting both spiritual fulfillment and material success. Critics argue that this approach dilutes traditional Christian messages about sacrifice and serving the poor. Despite the criticism, Jakes maintains a large following of people who appreciate his motivational messages and charismatic preaching style. His supporters argue that he genuinely helps people improve their lives and that his success proves God blesses those who serve him faithfully. They point to his charitable work and community programs as evidence that he uses his wealth for good purposes. 15. Kenneth Copeland. Perhaps no name in prosperity preaching causes more controversy than Kenneth Copeland. For over 50 years, he continues building his ministry on promises that faith can literally create wealth and health. His Kenneth Copeland Ministries remains incredibly wealthy, but most of that wealth appears to stay with Copeland and his family rather than helping the struggling people who support him. Copeland currently owns multiple private jets, claiming he needs them to avoid flying with people he calls demons in aluminum tubes. He lives on a massive ranch in Texas, owns expensive cars, and accumulates wealth that most of his followers can never imagine having. Yet he continues asking for donations, often suggesting that people's financial problems come from not giving enough money to his ministry. The preacher teaches that Christians can speak things into existence through faith and positive declarations. He claims that poverty is a curse that can be broken by believing the right things and giving generously to his organization. Critics argue his teachings primarily enrich him, while many followers remain financially struggling. 1. Creflo Dollar. Creflo Dollar is one of the most famous pastors in America, and his name always pops up when people talk about the prosperity gospel. The prosperity gospel is basically the idea that if you believe in God strongly enough and give to the church, you'll get financial blessings in return. It sounds nice, but many people criticize it because it feels like pastors use it to get rich themselves. And honestly, Creflo Dollar is the poster child for that. He started World Changers Church International in Georgia, and it grew massively. Thousands of people joined, and the church became very powerful. But instead of being known for humble living, Creflo Dollar became known for his flashy lifestyle. He drives luxury cars, wears expensive clothes, and the most shocking thing, owns private jets. A while back, his ministry even asked church members to donate so he could buy a $65 million Gulfstream G650 jet. That made people furious because many members of his church aren't rich at all. Critics said it looked like he was more focused on money than spreading the word of God. Creflo defended himself, saying he needed the jet to spread the gospel around the world. But to a lot of people, that excuse didn't work. They felt like Jesus lived simply, so pastors should do the same instead of asking for millions to buy planes. The story made headlines all over the world, and Creflo became a symbol of pastors who live like celebrities. Another controversy was his arrest in 2012. He was accused of physically assaulting his teenage daughter. He later denied the charges, but the news hurt his image badly. For someone already under fire for being too materialistic, this made him look even worse. 2. Bishop Eddie Long. Bishop Eddie Long was once one of the most powerful pastors in the United States. He led New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Georgia, which had tens of thousands of members. He was known for being very charismatic and energetic, and he often preached about living a good life, following God, and standing against things like homosexuality. For years, he was respected and admired by his community. But everything changed around 2010 when Eddie Long faced serious allegations. 4 young men came forward and accused him of using his position to manipulate them into sexual relationships. This was a huge scandal because Eddie Long had always preached against homosexuality, calling it sinful. The accusations made it look like he was living a double life, saying one thing in public, but secretly doing the opposite. Eddie denied the allegations at first, but eventually the case was settled out of court. He never admitted guilt, but the fact that he settled made a lot of people suspicious. Many church members felt betrayed, and critics called him a hypocrite. His once powerful reputation took a massive hit, and he became one of the most controversial pastors in America. In the years after the scandal, his health started declining. By 2016, photos showed him looking shockingly thin, and rumors spread that he was very sick. In January 2017, Bishop Eddie Long passed away at the age of 63 due to cancer. Even at his funeral, people were divided. Some remembered him as a spiritual leader who changed lives, while others could not forget the scandals that destroyed his reputation. 3. Juanita Bynum. Juanita Bynum is a well-known televangelist, singer, and author. She became famous in the early 2000s for her powerful preaching, especially messages aimed at women about living holy lives. She was once seen as a role model for Christian women, but over the years, her name has been connected to many controversies. One of the biggest issues with Juanita is her obsession with money. She has been accused of focusing more on wealth and fame than on actual ministry. For example, she has hosted events and conferences that charge high ticket prices, and critics say she seems to use the gospel as a business. At one point, she even admitted publicly that she was a mess and struggling with personal problems, which shocked her followers. Her marriage also became a very public scandal. She married Bishop Thomas Weeks III, but the relationship ended in disaster after she accused him of physically assaulting her. The incident became huge news because they were a high-profile Christian couple. Many people felt sorry for her, but others thought the way she handled the divorce in the media made her look more like a celebrity than a pastor. Juanita has also been known to make strange claims. For instance, she once said that she had to be delivered from homosexuality, which brought a lot of criticism. People accused her of using shocking statements to stay in the spotlight. Even with all the drama, Juanita Bynum still has followers who respect her preaching and music. She continues to appear on TV and hold conferences, but her reputation has never fully recovered from all the controversies. 4. Bishop T.D. Jakes. T.D. Jakes is one of the most famous pastors in the world. He leads the Potter's House, a huge church in Dallas, Texas, with tens of thousands of members. On top of that, millions of people watch him on TV, YouTube, and through his books and films. His preaching style is powerful and emotional, which made him a household name. But with all that fame came criticism, especially about how he mixes business with religion. One of the main complaints people have about T.D. Jakes is that he treats church like a brand. Instead of just preaching on Sundays, he runs a whole empire. He writes best-selling books, makes movies, sells merchandise, and hosts massive conferences that attract thousands of people. Some people see this as an amazing way to spread God's message. Others say it looks more like he's running a corporation than a ministry. Another controversy is about money. T.D. Jakes has a net worth in the millions, lives in a mansion, and travels in style. Critics say a pastor should live modestly, like Jesus did, instead of living like a celebrity. They argue that he's mixing faith with profit and turning the church into a business opportunity. His conferences, like Woman Thou Art Loosed, are expensive to attend, which makes people question if he's more focused on money than spirituality. T.D. Jakes has defended himself many times. He says he's not a televangelist just out to get rich, but a preacher who uses every tool available, books, films, conferences, to reach people. He also points out that he works hard and doesn't force anyone to buy his products or attend his events. Still, the debate never ends. But if you thought mixing business with ministry was wild, wait until you see the pastor who turned his lifestyle into reality TV fame. It gets crazier. 5. Noel Jones. Noel Jones is another well-known pastor leading the City of Refuge Church in California. He became popular not just because of his preaching, but also because of his personality and connections. He's the brother of singer Grace Jones, and he often appeared on the reality show Preachers of L.A. That show gave viewers a behind-the-scenes look at the lives of pastors, and Noel Jones quickly became one of the most talked-about figures. The biggest criticism Noel Jones faces is about his wealth and lifestyle. He drives luxury cars, wears sharp suits, and lives comfortably, which makes people question whether he's too focused on material things. Some churchgoers admire him for his success and say it proves God is blessing him. Others feel like he's showing off and not living the humble life a pastor should. His personal life also sparked debates. For years, he wasn't married, even though he was a pastor leading a large congregation. That led to gossip and speculation about how a single man could lead a church with so many family-oriented teachings. On Preachers of L.A., he often came across as someone who enjoyed the fame and lifestyle that came with being a celebrity pastor. Still, Noel Jones is known for being a talented speaker. His sermons are emotional and thought-provoking, and many people say he helped them grow spiritually. The problem is that his flashy lifestyle often overshadows his preaching. When people see him in expensive clothes and fancy cars, it creates debates about whether he's more focused on God or himself. 6. Al Sharpton. Al Sharpton is a unique figure because he's not just a pastor, but also a political activist. He started preaching when he was very young and became known as a fiery speaker. But over time, he became more famous for his role in civil rights and politics than for traditional church leadership. Today, most people know him as a political commentator on TV rather than as a pastor. Sharpton's life has always been filled with controversy. Supporters see him as a fighter for justice, someone who stands up for black communities against racism and inequality. He has led protests, spoken out after police brutality cases, and marched alongside families who lost loved ones. But his critics accuse him of using these events to gain fame and money. They say he sometimes shows up more for the cameras than for the cause. Financial scandals have also followed him. There have been times when his organizations were investigated for not paying taxes or misusing funds. This added fuel to the claims that he mixes activism with personal gain. Some people even question whether he's more interested in being a celebrity than being a pastor or activist. Still, Al Sharpton continues to be influential. He founded the National Action Network, which works on social justice issues. He also has his own show on MSNBC, where he comments on politics and race relations. He's often seen with politicians, celebrities, and other high-profile figures, which makes people debate whether he's more of a political insider or a genuine activist. 7. Jamal Bryant. Jamal Bryant is one of the most well-known pastors in America, especially among black churches. He first gained fame as the leader of Empowerment Temple in Baltimore, and now he's the senior pastor of New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Georgia, which used to be led by Bishop Eddie Long. Jamal is a really talented speaker. He knows how to fire up a crowd and connect with young people, which made him popular. But what makes him even more famous or infamous are his personal scandals. The biggest controversy around Jamal Bryant has always been his relationships. Back in 2008, his marriage to Giselle Bryant, who later became a star on The Real Housewives of Potomac, ended after he admitted to cheating. His divorce was messy and public, and many people said it showed he wasn't living the values he preached. Even after that, he's been tied to multiple rumors about affairs and relationships, some while he was still pastoring. When he was chosen to take over New Birth Church after Eddie Long's death, a lot of people criticized the decision. Eddie Long had been caught in scandals too, and many thought it was a bad idea to put Jamal, who also had a history of controversy, in that role. Critics said it looked like the church cared more about keeping its image alive than about finding a truly trustworthy leader. Jamal himself often defends his mistakes by saying he's human and that pastors aren't perfect. He tries to balance being a preacher with being someone who's open about his flaws. Some people respect him for his honesty, but others think he uses that as an excuse to keep messing up. Despite everything, Jamal Bryant still has a huge following. He talks openly about social justice and often speaks out about racism, politics, and community issues. That keeps him in the spotlight, but it also blurs the line between being a pastor and being a public figure chasing fame. 8. Bishop Clarence McClendon. Clarence McClendon is a well-known pastor who gained even more attention when he appeared on the reality show Preachers of L.A. He leads the Full Harvest International Church in California and is often called a prosperity preacher. That means he teaches that God wants people to be wealthy, healthy, and successful if they have enough faith and give generously to the church. The show Preachers of L.A. really exposed Clarence McClendon's lifestyle to the world. People saw him living in a big house, wearing expensive clothes, and driving luxury cars. He often spoke about how his success was a blessing from God, but viewers were divided. Some admired him for being bold about God's blessings, while others said he was showing off and exploiting people's faith. McClendon's teachings focus heavily on sowing seeds, basically giving money to the church in exchange for future blessings. Critics argue that this manipulates poor or desperate people into giving money they don't really have. They believe it makes pastors like him rich while church members stay struggling. His personal life also brought him into the spotlight. He divorced his first wife and later remarried, which created more controversy because many Christians see divorce as a big deal. On the show, his confidence and flashy lifestyle made him look more like a celebrity than a humble pastor. Still, Clarence McClendon has loyal followers. They believe in his message and say that his ministry has helped them financially and spiritually. He also has a strong presence in gospel music and often blends entertainment with preaching, which makes him popular among younger Christians. And just when you think that's the peak of flashy preaching, here comes a pastor who risked everything by changing the very meaning of heaven and hell. 9. Bishop Carlton Pearson. Carlton Pearson's story is one of the most unique and shocking in the world of pastors. In the 1990s, he was a superstar preacher. He led one of the biggest megachurches in Oklahoma, had thousands of members, and even appeared on TV with famous pastors like Oral Roberts. He was popular, powerful, and loved. But all of that changed when he made a dramatic shift in his beliefs. Carlton Pearson started preaching what he called the gospel of inclusion. Instead of teaching that only Christians go to heaven, he said he believed that God saves everyone, no matter what religion they are, or even if they don't believe in God at all. For him, hell didn't exist in the traditional sense. This was completely against what most evangelical Christians believed. The backlash was immediate and harsh. Other pastors called him a heretic, and many of his church members left. His once huge church shrank almost overnight, and he lost a lot of influence and friends in the Christian world. People accused him of chasing fame by trying to be different or watering down the gospel to attract attention. Even though he lost almost everything, Carlton Pearson stood by his beliefs. He said he felt God truly revealed the message of inclusion to him. Later in life, he even admitted how lonely and painful it was to lose his megachurch and be shunned by other pastors. Carlton's story became so famous that Netflix even made a movie about his life called Come Sunday, showing his rise and fall. In the end, he passed away in 2023, still standing by his beliefs. 10th, Fred Price, Sr. Fred Price Sr. was one of the early faces of the prosperity gospel in America. He started his ministry decades ago and eventually built a megachurch called Crenshaw Christian Center in Los Angeles, which included the famous Faith Dome. His preaching style was bold, and he became popular on TV through his program Ever Increasing Faith. Millions watched him, and he inspired many. But what made him controversial was his focus on prosperity, basically teaching that faith, positive confession, and giving money to the church would bring financial blessings and healing. Critics said Fred Price Sr. was turning Christianity into a get-rich-quick scheme. He often preached that God wanted believers to live in abundance and not in poverty. For many struggling families, this sounded hopeful. But others argued it was manipulative because pastors like him seemed to get rich while the members stayed poor. Fred Price's own lifestyle added fuel to the fire. He lived in luxury, drove expensive cars, and had a large home. Supporters saw it as proof that his teachings worked. He practiced what he preached, and God blessed him. But critics said it was hypocritical for a pastor to live like a celebrity while preaching about sacrifice and faith. Despite the backlash, Fred Price had a loyal following. His church was one of the biggest in Los Angeles, and his television program reached audiences worldwide. People who loved him said he taught them to dream bigger and believe that God could provide more than just the basics. But his name also became tied to the negative reputation of prosperity preachers. Fred Price Sr. passed away in 2021, leaving behind a legacy that's both admired and criticized. Some remember him as a man of faith who inspired confidence in God's blessings, while others remember him as a pastor who blurred the line between spirituality and materialism. 11th, Bishop I.V. Hilliard. Bishop I.V. Hilliard is another prosperity preacher who has been in the spotlight for controversial reasons. He leads New Light Christian Center Church in Houston, Texas, a megachurch with thousands of members. Like many prosperity pastors, he teaches that faith can bring financial success and encourages his followers to give generously to the church. But one moment in particular made him a target of criticism. A few years ago, Bishop Hilliard sent out a letter asking church members for donations, not for charity, not for feeding the poor, but for fixing his private jet. The repair bill was estimated to be around $50,000, and he told members that if they sowed a seed into the project, God would bless them with transportation breakthroughs in their own lives. The news spread like wildfire and made him look greedy. Critics said this was one of the clearest examples of how prosperity preachers exploit their congregations. Instead of using donations to help the needy, Hilliard was using them to maintain his wealthy lifestyle. Many people saw it as ridiculous because most church members probably couldn't even afford a private plane ticket, let alone donate to fix a jet. Despite the backlash, Hilliard defended himself by saying the request was about faith and partnership, not personal greed. He argued that pastors also needed tools, like jets, to spread the gospel. But the story damaged his reputation and made him an example whenever people criticized prosperity preaching. Even with the controversies, Bishop Hilliard still has a loyal base. He's known for his teachings on leadership, faith, and financial success. But for many outsiders, he'll always be remembered as the pastor who asked his congregation to pay for his jet repairs. 12th, Bishop Paul Morton. Bishop Paul Morton is the founder of the Full Gospel Baptist Church Fellowship, a network of churches across the United States. He became well known in the 1990s and 2000s for his preaching, gospel music, and leadership. He often mixed traditional preaching with prosperity gospel ideas, and that mix is what brought him both fame and criticism. Paul Morton preached about living a life of abundance and often connected financial giving with God's blessings. Like other prosperity preachers, he encouraged people to sow seeds, give money to the church, in order to see breakthroughs in their lives. Supporters said his message gave them hope and motivated them to believe that God wanted more for them. Critics, however, argued that his ministry sounded more like motivational speaking with a price tag. Morton also became controversial because of his leadership style. He built a massive following, but many accused him of running his church like a business empire. He released books, music, and conferences, and while that made him a household name in gospel circles, it also raised questions about whether it was ministry or branding. Even his personal wealth became a talking point. Like many megachurch leaders, Morton lived in comfort, which led to debates about whether pastors should be rich. Some people defended him, saying his success was a sign of God's blessing. Others said it was proof that prosperity gospel pastors were using religion for profit. Still, Bishop Paul Morton has made a mark on gospel music and preaching. He recorded hit gospel songs and inspired many with his emotional sermons. But alongside that success, his name is often mentioned when people talk about the problems with prosperity preaching, where the line between faith and money becomes too blurry. 13. Bishop Marvin Winans. Bishop Marvin Winans is part of the famous Winans gospel family, known for their powerful music and influence in the church world. He's the pastor of Perfecting Church in Detroit, Michigan, and he's also a well-known gospel singer. Because of his family name and his talent, he gained a lot of attention both inside and outside the church. But with fame comes controversy, and Marvin Winans has been criticized for the way he mixes preaching with prosperity and his lavish lifestyle. Marvin often talks about how faith can lead to blessings and success, a core idea of the prosperity gospel. He preaches about abundance and encourages people to live better lives through God. But at the same time, he's been spotted driving expensive cars, living in comfort, and appearing at high-profile events. This has made some people question if he's practicing what he preaches or if he's just using faith as a way to live big. The criticism became louder when people compared his lifestyle to the struggles of many church members in Detroit. Detroit is a city with a lot of poverty and economic problems, and some felt that seeing their pastor live in luxury while they struggled was unfair. Critics said he should be more focused on serving the poor and showing humility rather than showing off wealth. Another controversy came when he didn't let Whitney Houston's ex-husband, Bobby Brown, sit with the family at her funeral, which Marvin officiated. Many people saw that as disrespectful, and it added to the image that he was more concerned with status and appearances than compassion. Still, Marvin Winans has a loyal following. His church is big, his music career is respected, and he has influenced a lot of people with his preaching and songs. But his name is also linked to the bigger debate about prosperity preaching and whether pastors should live rich lives while leading churches in struggling communities. 14. Frederick J. Eicherenkoetter II. Reverend Ike, whose real name was Frederick J. Eicherenkoetter II, was one of the most famous and most controversial preachers of his time. He rose to fame in the 1970s and became almost like a celebrity pastor. Unlike many other pastors who tried to hide their love for money, Reverend Ike was bold. He openly preached that you can love God and money. That single line made him one of the most talked about pastors in America. He ran a ministry in New York and even had a radio and TV presence that reached millions. His main message was about prosperity. He taught that if you thought positively, believed in yourself, and gave to his ministry, you could have anything you wanted: money, cars, clothes, and success. He called it the science of living. What made him stand out was how flashy he was. Reverend Ike wore expensive suits, drove luxury cars, and even owned a Rolls-Royce. Instead of pretending to be humble, he proudly showed off his wealth. He once said, "The best thing you can do for poor people is not be one of them." That statement shocked many because it went against traditional Christian teachings about serving the poor and living modestly. Critics said he was basically a con artist using faith to get rich. They accused him of manipulating people into giving money so he could live large. But surprisingly, he still had thousands of followers who loved his confidence and believed his teachings helped them think differently about money and success. Reverend Ike's legacy is very mixed. Some see him as a pioneer who wasn't afraid to talk about wealth in religion. Others see him as the clearest example of how pastors can twist faith to become rich. Either way, he left a lasting impact on American religion and culture. 15th. Bishop Charles E. Blake Sr. Bishop Charles E. Blake Sr. is a big name in the black church world. He was the leader of the Church of God in Christ, which is one of the largest Pentecostal denominations in the world. As presiding bishop, he oversaw millions of members and thousands of churches, making him one of the most powerful pastors in America. But with such a high position, he also faced heavy criticism, especially about money and lifestyle. During his time as leader, there were many questions raised about how church finances were handled. Some people accused the leadership of not being transparent enough about where money went, especially donations from members across the world. Because the church was so big, even small financial issues became huge controversies. Critics said Bishop Blake was living too comfortably and wasn't showing enough accountability. On top of that, Bishop Blake lived in Los Angeles, one of the wealthiest cities in the U.S., and he was often seen as living a lifestyle more like a businessman than a pastor. While he wasn't as flashy as some prosperity preachers, his position and influence made people expect more humility from him. Still, Bishop Blake was respected by many for his leadership skills and his ability to grow COGIC into an even bigger organization. He was also deeply involved in community issues, especially in Los Angeles, where he worked on programs to help families and young people. But like many megachurch leaders, he couldn't escape the criticism that comes with wealth, influence, and power. For some, he represented stability and growth in the church. For others, he was just another leader who blurred the lines between ministry and money. Which one shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives like this, and turn on the bell so you never miss the next video.